Hey, what is going on, guys? Rudelanel here, coming back at you with some more Python code, and we are still looking at the URLLib module. Now, in the last two videos, we were taking a look at the convenient functions of URLLib. I mean, URL retrieve and URL open are really kind of great because we can just get things from the internet. We can grab data from websites. And that's awesome. That's going to be really helpful in some of our code. And we're actually going to be doing a little bit of that today, but I'm not going to be using the URLLib functions. I'm just going to be a little lazy and like copy and paste some data from a website. But hey, if you guys are feeling adventurous, you can try and rewrite it. You can like write your own little program that can grab data from an HTML table just by reading a string from the web page. I mean, get the web page as a string and then snag all the information and parse through it with like a split function in the Python's built-in language, that sort of thing. So that's an option, but today I'm going to be doing it kind of cheap. But hey, it gets the job done and it's nice for us. But anyway, back on topic. What we're going to be talking about today and what we're going to be looking at in this video is we're going to jump into these utility functions. And these are nice things that the URLLib kind of opens up for us, and we can use to just kind of manipulate the data that we would typically be using if we're working with an internet protocol. So the first thing that we're going to be looking at in this video is the quote function. Now, what the quote function does replaces special characters in string using the %XX escape. Letters, digits, and the characters underscore, period, and dash are never quoted. By default, this function is intended for quoting the path section of the URL. The optional safe parameter specifies additional characters that should not be quoted, and its default value is a forward slash. So an example here is like if you were to pass in forward slash tilde, Connolly, and then another forward slash, it will yield forward slash, and then the escape sequence with that %sign 7e, because that's the special character little escape sequence for the tilde. And you can saw that sort of sequence and formula up there, and it still has Connolly like we passed into it, and it's keeping those forward slashes because remember these are in the safe parameter, which specifies characters that are not going to be quoted or are not going to be manipulated. Quote plus does a very similar thing, but instead of using the the escape sequence for space characters, it replaces them with plus signs, which are typically used for quoting HTML form values. I'm not going to go into that today, but you can obviously just go ahead and edit the code that we're going to be writing, because I'm going to show you how you guys can use this function, and we're going to be trying to recreate it all on our own, which is really kind of simple because it's just some string manipulation. Unquote does the very same thing, but it reverses this operation. It replaces the escape sequences with their single character equivalent, and we're going to put that together. Okay, so I'm going to first open up idle, and then I'll show you what we can do with these strings. Python shell is right here, and what I'm going to do is import, let's see, URLLib. I'm not going to go ahead and use the from URLLib import everything. I'm just going to use this module here in its entirety. So, quote, where there's S for the string, and there's our safe string that can specify things that are not going to be interpreted or replaced. Remember, there's the forward slash in there by default, and let's pass in that example. I'll copy and paste it because I'm feeling a little lazy today. And actually, that's not the one that I want. I want the tilde in there so it will know to replace it all by itself. Now, we can do this with any sort of string that might have that information. I'll use like a hashtag. I'll use some waka waka less than or greater than symbols, whatever. I'll say help, and now it has the hashtag in there. It has the waka waka less than, the waka waka greater than. It has help. It even escaped this exclamation point. So there are plenty of options, and it does a whole lot of things. It's helpful and it's useful to us, and I wanted to show you this function, but we're going to try and recreate it all on our own. So, we need to know a little bit more information about these escape sequences. We need to know what they are. So this is pretty simple. I mean, we can just kind of go to Google, and I'll go ahead and look for URL special characters list, and you can see I've already done a little bit of research to kind of see what we're doing here. Now the first link is really nice because it gives us a nice little table of everything it's going to do. So what I'm going to do is, this is where I'm kind of cheap, I'm going to go ahead and copy this information, if it will let me. There we go. Thank you, Firefox. Thank you for cooperating. So I'll copy all of these values, and I'll go ahead and actually, what do I want to do here? Let's go ahead back into idle. Idle is right here. Okay, I'm going to create a new program. I'll bring this down so we can see it. And I will call this, let's see, quotes.py. Okay. And I'm going to start up a typical script, usr bin environment python. Good to get some boilerplate code out of the way. And we're going to go ahead and import URLLib. Okay. Now, what I'll just do is run URLLib, print URLLib, quote, and we can use hashtag waka waka help. Just like that again. And if we run this, you can see that it's doing the exact same output that we expected before, and it's doing it again and again and again. Okay, now, the code that we want to start writing is going to build us our own quote function. So, let's go ahead and define a function. I'll just call mine quote. Now, because we're importing URLLib like this, we're going to be able to use URLLib quote, and that will kind of separate it from the quote function that we write. So having the same name here doesn't really matter because we're still using the URLLib specifier. Now that's why I imported URLLib like this rather than using the from URLLib import everything, because that would take away that namespace separation. Alright, anyway, with the quote we're going to want our string, and what this will do is, let me take a look at my notes here, make sure I know what I'm doing. Okay, let's look at our contents, because what I want to set up is, I can do this actually in a text file. To make things easy, I will get a text file open. I'll get in Gedit, and you can see I've got this blue stuff all up here. I'll paste that right in, and I'm going to save this as characters.txt in my home folder. Okay. And now I'm going to get idle open up one more time. And what I'm going to do is open that file up. Actually, before I close out of that, I'm going to remove that space character. Open up. Characters, dogpark. So this space up here can just be a regular space character. Okay. Now, back to what I was thinking. File.h, that's going to be our handle. We can go ahead and open up characters.txt. Okay, that file's been created, so the contents is kind of just going to be what we read from there. Now I can print out these contents, and actually I just want the raw form. So see, all these tab files, all these tab escape sequences in the string in these new line characters, those represent a separation from what the value is that we're trying to replace with the special character, because we were able to find that online by using this table here. Now it's just a matter of us being able to manipulate this array that we just sort of generated for ourselves and being able to replace this all in a function and in a loop. So when we get the string that we pass into our quote function, it'll be able to sort of dissect it and take it apart. Okay, so I'll open, at least I'll get back to the code that we were writing once I can find it. There it is. Now, contents, as you can tell, was part of this here. And this is going to be, I can copy and paste that right in, a string that we're going to know are our escape sequence. That's our escape sequence. Okay, we can just call it that. And it's a string of all this crap. So I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit easier, and I'm going to get rid of all of the new line characters and these tab separators, because I want to be able to run the split function and actually just separate everything by a space character. So if I go ahead and type in escape sequence dot replace new line characters with nothing, so it simulates deleting them. tab characters with nothing. Now remember, the replace function actually affects that string, so we don't have to set it to be a new variable. It's not going to return anything. It's going to modify this string to begin with. Okay. Now we can set up a sort of like the new escape sequences, because this is going to return something, and we actually want to be working with it. We can set up new escape sequence. Actually, can we just kind of replace what we have here? I'll work with it later. We'll find out. New escape sequence. That can go ahead and equal. We're going to add in that space here, because if we run the split function, the initial space that we had up here is going to be removed, because remember, we're using space as our delimiter to create an array. That's what the split function does. So we have to add that space character in to our contents. I'm sorry, not our contents, our escape sequence. Split. Okay, cool. Now, just for debugging's sake, I'm going to see what we have here. So, and I'll go ahead and comment out this in our main function, and go ahead and run quote function, and it needs a string, so I'll just say that, whatever. Okay, so now in our shell we can see that we have a space character, and that's represented by this, hashtag is represented by this, yada yada yada, and this goes on for however long it takes, however long it needs to be running for. So now that we have all of this data separated, we can actually use it inside of a loop, or something that we set up to actually get information from the string that we pass into our quote function. So if I head over back to our script here, what I'm going to do is set up a counter, or a number that will help us loop through the string that we have, because our list, our array, is set up so that one variable is equal to the next variable. Sorry, at least that's going to be replaced with the following one. So we're actually sort of going step by step by 2, because we need to go from this one to the next one, to the next one, to the next one, because we're going to be looking at these characters to convert them into the next character. So we have to jump over 1. So what we have to actually do is, rather than using like a for count in escape sequence, we're actually going to be splitting apart the escape sequence and sort of looking at each individual possible value that we can use. So that's, I'm doing a really bad job of explaining that, but okay, count is going to equal to 0. So what we're going to say, escape sequence length is going to be the length of our new escape sequence. Now, we need to be able to modify the string once it's passed in, and we can't actually do that by using this string variable, because that's an argument being passed in. So we have to create our own new string variable that will allow us to do this. Okay, so new string, of an underscore there, can go ahead and equal string, and now we're actually going to begin our loop, or the way that we can sort of iterate through our escape sequence array and actually make some changes. So for count, that's our incrementer variable, remember. In range, remember that range allows us to get numbers, and we can also specify a step, or how much we're going to be jumping over at one point in the list. So we're going to start at count, which is initially 0. We're going to go for the escape sequence length, because that's how far we want to cover, that's how much ground we want to cover, sorry, and we're going to move by 2 at a time, because we want to go from this position to the next position, to the next position, to the next position. Great. So when you have that syntax set up, what we can do for now is I'm going to print out, actually, let's go ahead and modify new string first, and then we can print that out. If we print out new string after we've set it, it'll still look as good. So before we actually get to changing anything, I'll just show you how we can actually get the information from the escape sequences. So we're looking at escape sequence, and it's actually new escape sequence at this point. I'm wondering if we can change this to the old one. We'll just say escape sequence, and then we can go ahead and return escape sequence. This is just a testing thing for me. Print that out, run this, and Do we get the exact same result? Yeah, we do. Okay, cool. Then I'm just going to remove this little new tag in front of everything, new escape sequence, because that's a little ugly, and we don't need to be creating a new variable for something like that. Escape sequence, and then we're going to want to use our current count. So if we get this right, everything that will be displayed is the possible characters that we could pass in, or that need to be manipulated or changed. So that's going to be what we're replacing, and we're going to change it to the next value, so count plus 1. And that's why we're using numbers here, because we can actually access the following item in the list. So new string is going to go ahead and equal what we had initially, new string, because remember, we can't manipulate this one. We have to use one that's already here in our function. So new string dot replace, and then what we had initially with the count variable, or I'm sorry, what the possible escape sequence that we're going to be looking at is, and then of course the actual escape sequence for that character. So let's try this now. Now this is just going to be replaced with nothing, because new string is actually new string nothing, because we're passing in nothing in here. If what I were to do were to return new string at the very end of our function and actually put in something worthwhile here, like this crap right here, we can pass that right in. If I go ahead and take a look at what we have here when we run this, it's looking at, what am I doing? We want to see this one up here, and when we just run quote, it will go ahead and print that out for us. So it's printing out the escape sequence, and let's go ahead and return the new string so that we can see what's going on here. And we're going to want to print out that value. Okay, if we look at 25, 25 is the escape sequence character for the percent sign. Now the percent sign is only being accessed because we're sending in this hashtag. Now the hashtag sequence is percent sign 23. So once it's already ran the evaluation, so to speak, for the hashtag, it's going to run the evaluation for the percent sign, which is of course going to replace this interpreted value with the fixed, supposedly fixed anyway, inserted value. So we have to go ahead and modify this. We can't allow that percent sign to come at any time after anything that was already changed. We can modify this and actually set up if the percent sign is inside the string, or our new string, what we need to do is go ahead and replace it. And we can actually go ahead and take it out of our escape sequence list right up here. So we can go ahead and find it as 25 is the percent sign right here, and we can just close right out of that. We can cut that right out. I'll actually go ahead and call this a special thing called percent sign. Now you can see that this percent sign is split up in the sense that the percent sign is the first value, and the second value is going to be the actual escape sequence. So we can turn this into an array that would have been created as if we send it through the split function. So we're not going to include that space, but instead it's separated. Now when we have that set up, we can go ahead and modify it inside our initial string. What we can do is set up new string can equal new string, replacing percent sign 0 in our case, because we know that that's the index of our actual character. Replace that with our second one, percent sign 1 as the index, because that's going to be the escaped value. So now that that all works out, what we do here, sorry, I had a syntax error right there. Okay, now 23, percent 23, that's the hashtag. Percent 3c, that's our Waka Waka right up here. Percent 3e, that is our other Waka Waka, that greater than symbol. So okay, we've fixed the problem. It looks for the percent signs first because they're our top priority, and now they are out of the list. Great. So now we want to be able to look at everything else. Keep in mind that newString is being interpreted correctly. What it's doing is actually getting out all the information that we need to get out because it's set up in the loop that way. So I can go ahead and pass in the example that we saw online. I think it was Connolly. I know that's spelt wrong, but hey, I don't care. Now, when this prints out, we get a little bit of a different result because it's interpreting these forward slashes. But if we were to run that with the URLLibs function, remember, it's not actually going to do that. Now, why is that? If we run this, see, they interpret the %7e, but they don't interpret these forward slashes like we did in our function. Well, keep in mind that if we look at the documentation, quote actually keeps track of the safe argument, and that's optional. But it specifies additional characters that should not be quoted, and the default value is a forward slash. And that's why the example function runs the way that it runs. And we can actually manipulate our function to do this exact same. We can set up a safe function, and that can equal, let's say, the forward slash to begin with. And what we're going to do is test if the current character that we have set up is actually what we're looking at in the loop. And this is a conditional statement if our escape sequence count, so if the one that we're looking at is in safe, we're not going to change it. We're just going to completely disregard it and go to the next thing in our loop. So we're going to continue right here. Okay, cool. So now if I run this, we're still passing in the example program here, we get the exact same result that we should get. That's pretty freaking flawless, right? I mean, that's awesome. Okay. So, now we have that quote function set up, but there was an unquote function available in the library. Let's go ahead and see how we can manipulate that as well. If I just went ahead and copied this whole function, what we can do is call this one unquote, and the safe function there doesn't worry about the forward slash, so we don't have to bother with that one at all. So now what we'll do is modify our actual look-through a little bit, and we'll change %25 to equal %1, which was the original case, to... Actually, we can change this right up here to be %1, because those are, after all, the exact same value, and we can do that in our initial function as well. But in this case it will be 0 because we're looking at the literal value. And if that's in there, then we're going to fix it to be what it should be, and in this case we're going to be looking at escape count +1 and change this to count regular. So that works out very well for us. If we go ahead and print this, it's running our regular quote function, so we don't have to worry about that. But let's say that this is modified. And I want to print out modified just to be able to see it. And what we'll do next is print out the URLLib version of the unquote function for modified, and then we'll print out our own version. And let's see what happens. Okay, unquote takes exactly 2 arguments, but safe we want to make optional. So now, this runs perfectly as well. It interprets what we've set up and modifies it so it works the way that we want it to, because it's interpreting these values up here and replacing them to be their initial regular value. So if I pass in our strange one like we had used before, the #help, if I pass that into both of these functions, hopefully we'll still get the exact same result. And we do. Perfect. Except 21 is being interpreted. It's not in our function, but it is for URLLib. Okay, we can definitely add support for it, and this is where our data testing and our understanding comes in to be a good thing once again. So let's go ahead and let's call this a new line, and let's just say that tab %21. Let's see how well this works. If I run this, and help is ran correctly, help is ran correctly once more, and help is ran correctly, and help is ran correctly. Okay, so it might be a little fun to play around with this and see what else, and see what our escape sequence table or our escape sequence list doesn't really have support for. I guess trusting the resources online may or may not be the best example here and the best way to do things, but this is how it's set up, this is how I've accomplished this, and in all honesty, you will probably never ever need to use your own handwritten quote or unquote function, because you should be using the URLLibs, but I wanted to show you that this is a possible thing to do. We can set this up on our own. It's just a little bit of string manipulation, and creating it to work backwards and forwards like we did with quote and unquote, it's certainly doable. You just kind of have to know what you're dealing with, which I obviously didn't, because I made more than plenty of mistakes in this video. I hope you guys were able to understand me. If you're working with Python and you're well acquainted with the language and you've gone past everything that I've kind of already taught in the language tutorial, you should be able to understand of everything that I cover in these modules tutorials. So URLLib, the quote function, this is all doable, and I wanted to introduce it to you and show you how we can manipulate it and build it ourselves. Despite some caveats, I think we did a pretty decent job, and I hope you guys enjoyed this. I know it was a little hectic for this one, but thank you for bearing with me. It was definitely a long tutorial. But again, thank you. This is a really interesting subject and thing to talk about because we have so many options and the way that we want to set this up. Alright, I'm going to let you guys go. Thank you for watching. I hope we had a little bit of a learning experience together, and I will see you in the next tutorial. Bye.